Hello, I'm Waqar Rizvi, and this is Scope. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. The Sudanese military has said it regrets that some mistakes happened in its crackdown on the sit-in. Now, for most people, some mistakes would be an understatement. 100+ people killed. Is that just some mistakes? And then what about accountability? Will the military hold those who it says went rogue and/or committed mistakes during what it wanted to be a dispersal of the sit-in? Will it really do that? Or is it going to come up with excuses saying that there had been more than one coup attempt against the TMC, as it already has, essentially providing what seems to be a deflection and distraction from the main issues at hand? In these days, there have been reports of rapes and other such atrocities as well being committed against the Sudanese people, as the military seems to want to really hold on to power in the country in defiance of civilians who want, obviously, a civilian democratic government ever since the ouster of Omar al-Bashir. Let's discuss all of that a bit further. We're joined now by Yaseen Kippie, who holds a degree, I should say, from the University of Cape Town in politics, media and Arabic. He's also a journalist and youth show host on current affairs. He's joining us now from Cape Town. We're joined by Priscilla, Nwikpo, who is a public and political affairs analyst. She's joining us now from the British capital, London, via Skype. And we're also joined by Jacquelene, Coetzer, who is a former South African diplomat. She's a political analyst, consultant, and independent researcher, and she's joining us now from Pretoria. Jacquelene, Priscilla, and Yaseen, thank you all for joining us. Priscilla, I'd like to start with you, if I may. What do you make of the military and how it's acted ever since this crackdown took place?
Thank you for having me, Waqar. The actions of the military have, unfortunately, have not been very kind to the people of Sudan over this whole period. Having seen the rate of violence, the rate of as it's been reported, rapes against women and children, and the whole situation has been absolutely terrible. But it was very encouraging to hear the military spokesman, General Sham-Edin Kabashi, when he spoke a few days ago, to say that the military are going to take these allegations seriously because the military had made a mistake. And he also stated that it matters not what their ranks are. There will be accountability and people will be dealt with. So that is encouraging to hear. But then, this is Sudan after all. This has been going on for quite a while. And the military themselves have not proved that, we can take them seriously and believe that what they say is what we will see. But we would want to believe that the military, as he said, matters not their ranks, that they will be accountability and people will be held responsible because much has happened.
Yaseen, I wonder what your thoughts are on that, because whatever the military may say, and we are expecting a report to come out today about the military's investigation into what occurred during that crackdown on the sit-in, do you think that they will hold true to their word? Can they be trusted?
Currently, I cannot agree with a military accountability mechanism in Sudan, especially with regards to the resources that is out there. Not only is Sudan, at the forefront when it comes to forceful pressure on its protesters, 100 people killed in one sit-in in one afternoon. That's completely horrible. 17 more recently in a tent burning incident. But also they are being backed by the likes of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which has as its ally the United States of America. This makes the situation even harder. I'm currently in Cape Town speaking to Sudanese people in the diaspora here. They don't have any hope in the military holding anyone accountable too.
So then if the military, as you said, Yaseen, be trusted, then what is the next move? Shouldn't there be then an objective international investigation, as even the U.S., the newly appointed U.S. envoy for Sudan has said?
Well, the problem here is that we need to find what is the lesser of the two evils, because the international investigations, whether it comes from the UN or the ICC for that matter, the success rate has not been that high. There needs to be an independent body made up of perhaps other African nations, including certain other members across the world, in order to really sift out what actually happened in these matters, as well as what the best way forward. My personal opinion when it comes to the best way forward is the need for peace treaties right now, for there to be a ceasefire, complete ceasefire. If that does not occur, what you'll see is more blue posters happening on people's profile pictures, international pressure increasing, and eventually the military going to be toppled over in one way or another in Sudan.
Jacquelene, do you agree with that? Do you think that we are in for the long haul possibly when it comes to this issue of Sudan, or do you think that there is something on the horizon where an agreement between protesters, or civilian protesters, I should say, of course, and the military can actually hold? Because, we have seen agreements so far between them fall apart.
Okay, I didn't catch a bit of what you said there, but in essence, my concern is, at what level will the accountability be? Is this just going to be a whitewash from the military side, that they're just going to sacrifice some junior or mid-level people, or sacrifice a couple of senior people they want to get rid of? Or is there going to be actual accountability? Because if we have to be serious and objective about this, then the order most probably came from the leader of the Transitional Military Council, that is General Al-Burhan. Will he take accountability for his actions? I mean, we've seldom in any situation in the entire world seen that any military leader has taken responsibility for their actions, for murder, for rape, for genocide, war crimes, any of these things. I mean, the people who are in power now are the same people who have been in power for more than 30 years with al-Bashir, which is why the civilians were so unhappy and why they want civilians in power, which I fully agree with and understand. But I cannot in all objectivity see here that they will really take responsibility and allow themselves to be incarcerated or held accountable, because they're the people who did it, so
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, so let me go to Priscilla. Priscilla, do you think that the answer lies within Africa itself? Should Africa be dealing with these issues on its own instead of, for example, having the greater international community being involved? We, of course, already know that the AU, the African Union, has suspended Sudan since that crackdown on the sit-in. Does the AU or other bodies within Africa, do they have the ability to handle the situation in Sudan?
I believe they do. I think it's important for the AU to be able to step in at this point. I'm aware that they have sent, a representative to go and investigate on the issue. But I think it's important that they take a strong stand and they lead the investigation and ensure that those whom the military say are now in custody, don't just remain in custody and it evaporates, but they are then prosecuted. As we are told, there'll be no leniency. So let that leniency not just remain with junior officers, but goes right through the rank, again, as we're told. But it is important. I do believe that the AU has what it needs to be, what it takes to be able to come into this situation. They must at some point now be able to take responsibility and be able to ensure that they hold their fellow African governments to account, and that they're able to ensure peace when situations like these occur.
Priscilla, if I may come for a moment, because a thought that just struck me, and a lot of the Sudanese protesters and civilians around the world, in fact, those who are watching about what's happening within their country, have said that, listen, a lot of these military members themselves were obviously part of the Omar al-Bashir era and government, and are really his allies who have now fallen out with him. If there is an accountability to the sense of, listen, if you were aligned with Omar al-Bashir, why are you still in power? Why are you leading what should be, quote unquote, a democratic transition? Then can we really be optimistic going forward at all?
Well, something has to give. When the military came in, they came in because they wanted to restore peace. I believe that was their reason for taking over then. Something has to give. And I think it's important for all their allies, the allies of Sudan, and all of those that have been sent in to represent various countries, to come together and to have this conversation with the military and to ensure that the military does what they say they will do. because without that, the country can't move forward. In order for there to be peace, in order for the lives that are lost, to stop that, to put an end to this, the military has to work with all the other representatives and bodies to ensure peace in Sudan. It's absolutely necessary.
So Yaseen, we've seen the Ethiopian Prime Minister, for example, being involved. I know that his reputation can go both ways, both good and bad, but it seems that both sides appreciated his mediation and the efforts of his envoy. Do you think as well that Africa can handle the situation on its own?
Again, I think the level of chaos at the moment is far beyond, an institutional, solving of the problem, especially the AU with all of its problems. I really do think we need to give voice more to the protesters and the ordinary people themselves. We need to hear their stories. What do they actually want? I mean, we've seen in Rwanda, the only way that we could actually succeed was to get people...
But Yaseen, to be fair, though, I mean, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but to be fair, protesters are not just one body, right? We don't really have necessarily one specific leader coming out of them. I may be wrong, so you can correct me on that, but until you don't appoint one representative, it's very hard then to know who are you really speaking to.
Well, that's absolutely true. But I think, the problem here that we see is currently the UN is withdrawing some of its peacekeepers in Sudan, and that's just strengthening the military hold in Sudan. And if we don't have people on the ground in Sudan finding out what the actual stories are, then we won't truly have the full image. I think once we have that, once we do a proper survey, once we interview those people, and I mean, I've been trying to do that. I've been speaking to some people from Sudan, where their family of people are currently in my country, in South Africa, and they are saying that they can't go out of their homes because they don't trust anyone. They simply want socio-economic reform, but on top of that, they want a social reform and a promise that they will be treated as human beings before any of these other things. Institutionally, we may have interventions from the AU and from other presidents, but at the end of the day, that will mean nothing unless we actually cater to what the needs of the Sudanese people are, and that's for the military to be completely disposed and a civilian government to be put in place.
Okay, so Jacquelene, I want your thoughts on that, because, if we're looking elsewhere within Africa and what's happened recently there, Jacquelene, so I mean, I'm just going to use the example of Egypt, Algeria. In Egypt, we have a strong man, military man back in power, a dictator, according to some. In Algeria, we have an ally, again, of Bouteflika back in power, Ben Salah. Do you think that Sudan is going to go that same way, or do you think that this will actually pan out in the protesters' favor?
To be honest with you, the way things are going now, I'm seeing that the military council will stay in power. I cannot see, I mean, if you've been in power for 30 years, you've enjoyed all the comforts, the luxury, you basically can do whatever you want in the country. I can't see that anyone is going to give that up, especially a military person. They're not the kind of people who want to give up power once they have it. I'm hoping for the best that we will have actual democratic transition in Sudan, which is what the people want, which is what we all want and need. But honestly, I cannot see the military giving up power. I mean, I'm putting a lot of hope now in the fact that the AU has appointed a special envoy, Ambassador Mohammed Al-Hassan al-Labat, to Sudan. And this is a gentleman who I know personally was the Mauritanian ambassador to South Africa. Mm-hmm. If anyone has the ability to, from a diplomatic perspective, intervene and to bring the parties together, this is the one person who can do it.
Okay, so then Jacquelene, because we're running out of time and I want to give you the final word, what do you think is really at stake when it comes to Sudan? Because, when we talk about Africa or any country really around the world, a lot of times when the international community and other countries get involved, many people say that, listen, this is less about just the people's rights and about the resources possibly of that country and who really holds power in strategic countries especially. And as we know, Sudan is very strategically placed.
Yes, Sudan is, I mean, the position where they are is extremely strategic. But if you look at the history, nobody has ever really cared about Sudan. I mean, the crisis has been going on there for how long? We had the whole situation with the South Sudan and the war, and with that, we had the whole situation with Darfur. But the rest of the world doesn't really seem to care about Sudan because they're not like Venezuela. They haven't got oil. And that is one of the crucial factors. If Sudan had significant oil resources or some other resources that were extremely important, or they were extremely politically important, like Egypt is in with regard to the whole situation in the Middle East, people would be more interested in getting involved. But Sudan, as far as the rest of the world is concerned, it's just another African country. They haven't got resources that make them crucial for other countries to want to get involved.
Right, that's a very good point to then end on. I'll thank all three of our guests who took their time out, and of course we appreciate their insight and analysis. That was Jacquelene, Priscilla, and Yaseen who were speaking to us there about the latest situation in Sudan. As we know, the military has promised accountability, saying it regrets that mistakes happened, but that statement in and of itself doesn't give one much optimism, at least myself, about whether or not accountability will actually take place at the highest levels, as the military says it will. We'll have to wait and see what happens next, but we know that 100 plus, according to some estimates, 173 is the highest estimate that I've seen today before this show, have been killed over the past number of days. And then, of course, we have a number of rapes, a high number of rapes as well taking place by the military, by rapid response forces, etc. Will there be accountability for all of the above as well? Let's keep a close eye on Sudan. I'll be back, though, after a short break with our next segment. Welcome back, viewers. You're still here in Scope with me, Waqar Rizvi. In this segment, we're going to discuss the SCO Summit. That is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, which took place this year in Bishkek. Leaders from member states, of course, of this organization met there, and a lot was discussed. Part of the communications that happened there between different leaders, it seems that the main message that came out is one of multilateralism and against trade protectionism, in part, of course. There were other issues as well brought forth, such as the fact that this organization does not justify, of course, any acts of terrorism, extremism, saying that, of course, the SCO plays an important role in resolving regional as well as international issues. As we know, the Pakistani Prime Minister also went to this SCO summit, and he, of course, spoke about peace and made overtures towards that regard with even the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in part, of course, saying also that Pakistan is open for investment also. But again, as I said, the main takeaway seems to have been the greater message out of this summit, and that of multilateralism instead of unilateralism. To discuss that all a bit further, we're now joined by Wang, who is a foreign policy researcher from SOAS at the University of London. He is joining us now from London itself. We're also joined by Giolzetti, who is a China policy analyst, and he is joining us now via Skype from Beijing. Don and Kai, thank you both for joining us. Kai, I'd like to start with you, if I may. What do you think is the main takeaway from this SCO summit? Of course, timing is also very important, isn't it?
All right. As you said, the timing of SCO summit is very sensitive. We know in the background of the rising of unilateralism and protectionism, the world now has a great anticipation in and demand for the SCO. And since one of the core values of the SCO is to promote cooperation and enhance mutual trust. And without that, China is facing escalating conflict with the United States, and in this background, we see China has to leverage more international platforms to release the information, which is combating unilateralism and removing the barriers of free trade. And we hear President Xi already called on SCO member states to build a closer community of shared future and to encourage multilateralism, free trade, and more reasonable and fair international order. And also in this sensitive stage, China needs more global support or consensus through the official documents of SCO. So the voice from, we know from a regional organization presenting 41% of the global population is stronger than the one country. Yeah. And also we could see, we should not forget, like during the summit, there were several bilateral meetings between China and other countries for them to coordinate position, about major international and regional issues. Of course, the trade friction has to be one of them. since there are not only trade frictions between China and the U.S., but also frictions between the U.S. and other countries.
Yeah.
So Chinese officials do hope the countries who are facing the similar situations would join the fight against Trump's protectionist policies. And indeed, trade protectionism and unilateralism are very much on the rise globally. How to respond to this is not only a question to China, but also has direct bearing on the recovery of global economy.
Okay, so then, Don, I want to get your thoughts on this. This all comes at an important time, of course, as I put to Kai as well. I want to get your thoughts on that, because this is in the lead up to the G20 summit, which is set to occur soon, and right after Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin had also met. What do you make of the timing, and what is this message that is being sent to the international community and especially, of course, the United States?
Sure. Definitely the timing. It's all about timing. As Kai mentioned, you have basically a economic and technological row with the U.S. right now underneath the context and backdrop of more protectionism and a little bit more bilateral/unilateral focus, especially with the Trump administration. So underneath this context, it's really important for China to portray itself as a country that promotes multilateralism and is a country of win-win cooperation attitude. Now, this is the current context, and this is the current context leading up to the G20 at the end of the month. And so I think it's important, too, to have the fact that they have this right before the G20. It is usually scheduled around June, but it's important, significant timing to the lead up to the G20. And I think it provides a stepping stone for Russia and China on their way to the G20 to show that they have built up a regional, because this is a Eurasia regional cooperation, multilateral organization, that they have a regional cooperation agreement ahead of the G20. And this will provide some facade ahead of the G20 summit in Osaka, Japan.
So then, Kai, do you think that the United States is viewing this with a bit of nervousness and worry? And do you think that what impact do you think this will have on that G20 meeting? Do you think that the U.S. is coming into that meeting at a disadvantage?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I have to say G20 itself is an ideal platform for member states to present voices of cooperation, collaboration, and we know from G8 to G20, it shows a more inclusive and comprehensive international mechanism. It's apparently more useful in dealing with global issues such as financial crises as well as environmental problems. And President Trump already said that the U.S. will not take the lead in many aspects. So international institutions have to be the core element of promoting prosperity. I don't know whether the U.S. would be worried about the G20, but I think there would be some fierce debate on this summit. Should be.
Don, one of the things that seems to the message overall, at least from the Trump administration, is that the global economy really is being used as a weapon, isn't it? That this trade war with China and even sanctions on Russia, it can be argued, are really ways to try to ensure American dominance. Is that correct, do you think? And do you think that then Donald Trump will learn a hard lesson on?
I believe that from the Trump administration's perspective, it's more about a rebalancing, at least from U.S.-China relations perspective, when it comes to trade, when it comes to economy, when it comes to market access, and so on. I think this is the focus of the Trump administration. And one way of perhaps providing foundation support for this type of new strategy is the fact that they want to promote more bilateralism or unilateralism. This is the preferred approach for the Trump administration, and obviously that's embodied in the America First policy. So this is the counter approach to Xi Jinping's multilateral engagement with the world. And I feel like the Trump administration wants to promote that, but more of a bilateral approach and continue that. That doesn't mean that they want to withdraw from international institution. It's that they want to make sure that there is a bilateral focus with each country's internal and bilateral interests being represented in agreements, cooperations, and negotiations.
So then, Kai, one of the major things we can talk about with trade war overall really is the tech war as well, isn't it, over the 5G networks right now. Do you think that that China will win out in this case, really globally? Because obviously, I would imagine that most countries, Kai, looking at such technology and the importance and the progress that it would bring their respective countries, do not want to miss out on that sort of advancement, do they?
I agree. I think this is not just a trade conflict. It's like a broader strategy from the U.S. to rebalancing. I totally agree with that. And most Chinese experts or citizens have hardened their belief that the U.S. aspires to block China's rise and cut short their prosperity and growing quality of life. So I think many experts in China believe that the chance of breaking through in the G20 summit is very slim.
And so then in the G20 summit, if there is a slim chance then to resolve the entire trade war issue, Kai, if this lingers on for much longer, that's bad for the global economy, isn't it? And then that sort of then reflects badly, doesn't it, on the SCO as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think that should be bring more risky elements or potential risk to the global economy.
Don, what do you make of that? Because if the global economy is to suffer and go through this this period where these two major economic powers around the world are clashing, that's not good for either side, but not good for the world either. And that sort of then defeats the purpose of organizations such as the SCO, doesn't it?
Sure. I think there's no doubt that when you have the world's two biggest economies in a trade conflict, that no doubt the global economy is going to suffer as a result. I recall just recently from the American side, now this is just the American perspective, 600 companies and trade organizations just sent the Trump administration a letter saying that they are being affected significantly by the current trade conflict with China. So it's definitely going to continue to hurt, especially developed countries when we look at it from a global perspective, and thus entirely the global economic system. So this is going to hurt in terms of substantial effects. Now, it does with the SCO. The SCO is a little bit different because it's more of a regional cooperation mechanism. So it definitely has aspirations for more global integration, especially from the Chinese side, but it's a regional cooperation mechanism. Now, of course, the principles of the SCO are in line with the fact, or are not in accordance with the current trade issue, of course. They are for an open and equitable trade relationship with all countries involved. And so it does not go in accordance with the SCO principles, like the Shanghai spirit. So in that sense, there's a commonality. But we have to look at it from a little bit different perspective. It is still, although the Eurasian landmass is massive, it is still more of a regional aspect.
Kai, one of the major things about the SCO is its political power as well, isn't it? With all these member states, of course, including China and Russia and others as well. Do you think that the SCO has the ability to be a platform where issues such as the Iran nuclear deal, Afghanistan, peace in Afghanistan I'm talking about, as well as other global issues can be resolved, even including Syria, for example? Do you think that these countries now, China, Russia, and others, are going to take the lead when it comes to all of the above?
Well, I think SCO has played a more and more important role in dealing with regional problems. I think there are two aspects for it. One is boost security, another is promote prosperity. So for the security issue, we see the Chinese president said the SCO should continue to give priority to its commitment to maintain regional security and stability. And I think he's right to some extent when he says unity and cooperation is important. The unity would be essentially demonstrated by way of cooperation by the member countries in various domains. And in this SCO structure, I think China would play a more and more important role in it.
And so then do you think that at this time the SCO should be more politically involved then as well? Kai, apart from just, of course, communiques and otherwise, do you think that there will now be more SCO activity or otherwise on the sidelines in the future summits also?
Yeah, I think we have already seen like SCO have played more and more have played a more and more important role in it, and also we have also seen like Chinese President Xi called on the member states to action solidarily to solve these problems. I think so. Yeah.
All right, we'll leave there as a final word, but of course we appreciate both of your time, your insight. That was Kai speaking to us from London. We were also joined by Dawn, who was speaking to us from Beijing. We appreciate, of course, the analysis that they brought to the discussion. An important summit, certainly. The timing, important in the lead up to G20, right after the meeting also between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin there. What message is this sending? It's sending a message of multilateralism at a time when the Trump administration seems to be still living in a world of unilateralism, or is it, as Dawn said, in fact, that it's not as pessimistic as we've been speaking about, just that America is putting itself first and is very much still wanting to be dealing with the international community, but on a bilateral basis, less than a multilateral basis. Which vision will win out? It seems that's quite clear, really. The Chinese and Russians seem to be taking over, at least from an economic and global perspective as far as influence around the world goes. But of course, America still very much has the power to spoil and muddy the waters. We'll keep a close eye on that and the impact that such summits have going forward. Also, I'll be back, though, after a short break with our next segment. Welcome back, viewers. You're still here in Scope with me, Waqar Rizvi. A German woman named Klemp is being charged, or may face, I should say, pardon me, up to 20 years in an Italian prison on charges of allegedly aiding illegal migration. She's a member of an NGO called Sea-Watch, which deploys vessels to rescue asylum seekers trying to escape Libya specifically and reach Europe by boat. She's, according to some estimates, saved several thousand such people at this time. But the Italian government and other governments, in fact, across Europe are saying that the rest of Europe isn't doing its fair share of taking care of these migrants, and that such people, such as Ms. Klemp, in fact, make illegal migration and human trafficking otherwise that much easier to carry out. Do they have a point? Or is this simply just an issue of human rights in Italy and not respecting it? We want to hear both sides, of course, of that argument and understand the context of all of this a bit further. We're joined now by Ms. Valeria Giannotta, who is an academic and expert of international relations at Turk Hava Kurumu University. She's joining us now from Ankara. We're also joined by Davide Quadri, who is an international secretary at Lega Giovani. He's joining us now from Lombardia in Italy. Davide and Valeria, thank you both for joining us. Davide, I'll start with you. What do you make of this case of Klemp? Do you think that the Italian government and Italian judiciary is correct to charge her?
Yeah, they have to do that because we have to respect the law. And the law is very strict about immigration now. Everything is changed with the government of Matteo Salvini. And now we want to face the problem and the humanitarian crisis of the Mediterranean Sea, but not with the NGO that can do whatever they want in the sea. There is a law. They have to respect the law, and they are not doing that. So that's why they are in charge about the jail and the judiciary system. So I think it's totally fair what is going on, because we have also to show the world that Italy have a law, and we have to respect that law. For too many years, they can do whatever they want in the Mediterranean Sea. They can help the human trafficker. They can help mafia with all that seller of people. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work because it put a lot of life in danger in the sea. And there is thousands of deaths in the sea, in the Mediterranean Sea. But now, with the law and with the government, the Italian government, is facing that problem, and there is less death in the sea than in the past, because there is a very strong impact to deterrent to the illegal immigration.
Valeria, what do you make of that? When we look at this on the face of it, Valeria, for a lot of us, this seems like something that is against human rights. But do you think, in fact, that this is actually a good thing, where, as Davide said, that this is about respecting a country's laws, and secondly, actually, this is good for the human rights of people, where it saves people's lives instead of them taking dangerous journeys on the Mediterranean?
Well, of course, we can look at the issue from two different sides. I mean, in the first side, this is what happened in Italy recently is just a sort of criminalization of an effort of rescuing people, so related to human rights. On the other side, as the other colleagues say, Italy perceived all of this movement as sort of effort in order to support illegal immigration. And of course, after the Northern League, now the Italian League came to power in the 4th of March 2018, a lot of several laws were applied in order to block or in order to cope with the situation of immigrant flow. Italy, in terms of the immigration, is the first country at European level facing the huge amount of immigrants as at the first shore. That's why our Minister of Interior, Matteo Salvini, Deputy Prime Minister, applied a sort of rules in order to close the ports of these NGOs vessels and in order to regulate the immigration flow. Of course, if we look in the wider perspective, Europe is under pressure of migratory flow as well. I mean, all the Schengen area is under such a pressure, and Italy is one of the leading countries on this in terms of people arriving to the coast. There are even some estimations saying that the number of immigrants arriving to Italy actually are much less comparing the number of immigrants that Germany, Austria, and France are sending back to Italy as well. So there is a huge issue in a national term, and there is an issue related to security. I mean, the political rhetoric nowadays in Italy is pretty much focusing on the idea of security and the threat that is coming from the immigrants. But of course, as the United Nations Agency for Refugees stated, this can create a sort of stigmatization of immigrants as a possible terrorist, and it can increase even the climate of hatred and xenophobia that it already exists, not just in Italy, but in the whole Europe.
And that's a very good point you made there, Valeria, because I want to put that to Davide. Davide, do you or other people who support the Italian government in this manner, do you think that there is a danger of an anti-refugee feeling, a racist feeling, a xenophobic feeling towards others who are seeking safety and security either in your country or in the rest of Europe?
Well, racism still exists in Italy, in Europe, in everywhere in the world, because stupid people still exist in the world. So that's not a point about law and government. It's about ideology that is a very minority ideology now. But what is to be clear and sure is that we are not anti-refugee. We are anti-illegal immigration. First of all, we need to check who is coming in our country. We need to take care of there is asylum keeper and the people who deserve asylum. If you're escaping for a land that is a very turmoil, is a very problematic land, then we can take care of you. We have to take care of you. But it's the law that say that. But if you are only here to take some welfare benefits or to start a new life because you have some problem, legal problem, economic problem in your country, that doesn't matter. And that can work. Because if I go to China, if I go to US or to other country, they have to check who I am, and they're not here to take the benefit of the welfare state.
David, if I may come in, because a lot of these people are escaping war, aren't they? So they're escaping literally to save their lives. How do you feel about that?
Well, it depends about the method, the state that we have to work on that, because there is also some international agency that they have to be clear what is war, what is not war. Yes, you can have some problem in your country, but at the same time, it's not up to Europe to take care of the problem of all the world. So I think it's quite important to check who is coming, if you have the legal status to stay there like a refugee, or if it's not there, because you have a real dangerous problem in your country, it's only economic problem. Yes, you can have an economic problem, but you have to work on your country, you have to build on your country. We need more cooperation maybe, but we cannot take all the people that came here in the last year, and then we cannot face all the problem of the other country.
Okay, Valeria, what do you make of, on the face of it, that makes sense, right? That argument where, listen, Italy needs to protect its national security. It can't just be a free-for-all, right? We can't just have this, uncontrolled flow of people around the world. No country would really accept that. So then how does one then deal with this situation other than what Italy has already done?
I do agree with this rhetoric, and even according to some surveys, actually the average of the xenophobic rate, let's say, in Italy is not that high. I have just the impression that the Italians nowadays are just afraid of something that they don't really know. I mean, I take as granted the fact that there is a security concern, there is the urgency, the emergency to regulate the flow towards Italy, even because if Italy is experiencing already a critical situation according to unemployment, according to economic factors, and so on. As I told you before, Italy is even the first gate of entrance towards Europe and the Schengen area, and it's under totally pressure about this immigration flow. But I would like just to give a data. I mean, I think just 2% of the Italian people are Muslims. So actually Italy doesn't feel really under threat, in my opinion. And if we look at the wider perspective, Italy is just the only country in Europe who did not experience yet, thanks God, any terroristic attack, Islamist attack by jihadists, for example. So I have the feeling that it's just mainly a security concern. Italy has to protect its national interest, and it's not really related to xenophobia or Islamophobia as well.
That's interesting. Davide, I wonder, when we're talking about national security, do you think that it's possible that Matteo Salvini and others have overblown this issue a bit, overstated it, exaggerated it, just to win, really, in elections and just to encourage more far-right politics?
Well, it's democracy. So if we say something bad that is not in the field of the people, that is the will of the people is the most important thing in our constitution and also in all the constitution, the democratic constitution, you don't take any votes. But if you say that and they take the 35% of the votes, you say that there is a problem and the people have that feeling, and they have to vote, and they vote in that in the matter. So I think it's reaching the good point, and is not playing with fear. Is reaching also the voter scare and the voter anxious about the future. And there was a problem with immigration in the last years because there is no a very good check at immigration. We have some problem also because we have thousands of illegal that we don't know who they are because they don't have really checked in the last year. So it takes a good point, and the election show that is something that the voters care. So we need to do the will of the people because we are in democracy.
So then are you saying, Davide, that Italians do not have a problem? For example, if somebody were to come over to Italy and they are Muslim or they're somebody of a different culture altogether, are you saying that this is not xenophobia, that this is not Islamophobia, that is not the root cause of why they may vote for somebody like Salvini?
Well, I don't think that is the majority. You still have some xenophobes, some racists, because in all the world there is stupid people and they have a stupid sentiment. But I don't think it's the really matter of the voters of Matteo Salvini. We have the first elected black senator in the Italian parliament, and is a member of Lega. He came from Nigeria 40 years ago. He worked, he became an entrepreneur, and then he became a member of the parliament. So it's not about white supremacists or other stuff like that. It's only about legality and take care of the interest of the country. And at the same time, I don't think that there will be I don't think that the problem about also Islamization and also some terrorist attack is on the percentage of people who came here and they are Muslim. It's about the good of the people who came here. Because you can have only one person that is very dangerous, is very sick, and then it can do problem. So that is also an issue.
Valeria, I'm going to give you the final. Valeria, as you know, Southern European leaders just recently met and they called for fair distribution of migrants arriving from across the Mediterranean. These are the leaders of Cyprus, France, Greece, Italy, Malta, Portugal, and Spain. They said that the EU should guarantee effective implementation of this principle of solidarity and burden sharing. Do you think that the European Union has failed when it comes to this issue of fair distribution?
Well, I think the European Union has a huge responsibility, and not just about immigration and some other issues, but definitely has a responsibility. I mean, it comes even the fact that it comes in my mind the 2016 agreement between the European Union and Turkey, for example, in order to contain the huge amount of refugees coming towards the European Union and the blockage of the Balkan route as well. Of course, as I mentioned, Italy is the first shore. So the biggest amount of refugees are coming directly to Italy, and it's not even fair that Italy has to handle the biggest number of refugees within his own territory as well. And the European Union wasn't able to distribute. According to some data, again, it comes that refugees from Germany, for example, Austria, from France, and from some other neighboring countries of Italy are sent back to Italy as well. So Italy is under a huge pressure by this immigrant flow too. And of course, European Union has to review the policy, has to review even the balance of power within itself. Because when we speak about European Union, who is deciding about European Union? I mean, all the countries are equal, or are Italy, France, Italy, Greece, Portugal are coming after the main countries such as Germany or France and so on. So there is a huge dilemma within European Union as well, as the last European elections has showed as well. Like this new alliance between the far-right parties actually gives a sign that something is not wrong, is not working well within European Union. There is a need to go back to a national interpretation of politics, first of all, and then able to develop something which is called supranational too.
Indeed. Very well. We'll leave there as a final word, but of course we appreciate both of your time, your insight and analysis. That was Valeria speaking to us from London. We were also joined by Davide, who was speaking to us from Lombardia in Italy. We thank you both for putting this all into context for us. It's an important discussion to have, viewers, because we only really ever hear the other side of the story, don't we, in international media, where it's just about the human rights issues, etc. But there isn't context of the other side. We just presume that the other side is racist, xenophobic, etc. And it very well may be to an extent, but that doesn't mean every single person who is worried about the national security of Italy is necessarily racist or xenophobic. Otherwise, these are legitimate concerns if you look at them on paper. No country can just allow a free flow of people in, can they? But then one of the issues that we didn't touch upon and weren't able to get to is that, of course, of the foreign policies of countries such as Italy and that impact that it has on countries across the world and the instability that is created through that. What about the foreign policies? Should countries like Italy and the rest of Europe also then change their foreign policies to ensure that no other country around the world is made unstable through an effect of one of their policies also? That is an important discussion to have, and hopefully we'll get to that in a later segment here on Scope here at Indus News. We'll leave it there for now for this program. I've been Waqar Rizvi. Thanks for watching.